Meet Gertie, the dinosaur. This 12-minute movie is considered to be one of the first animated film made in 1914, more than 109 years ago. Winsor McCay practically invented keyframe animation as we know, and it depicts a dinosaur. The first animation of all time is paleoart, an attempt to bring extinct animals such as dinosaurs and mammoths back to life. But it's in black and white, missing one of the most important elements for the imagination: colors. 15 years ago, if you asked a paleontologist what the colors of a dinosaur were, he'd say that's something we'll never know. There wasn't the remotest hint of it. Unfortunately, some information has simply been lost to time and not preserved in the rocks, leaving paleoartists with the speculative task of imagining the colors of extinct animals. But since a revolution has taken place, technological and methodological innovations have done what seemed impossible: infer the living colors of some of the best preserved fossils we know. They were very different from what we imagined. Today, you're going to meet 5 extinct animals whose colors and general appearance have been patiently deciphered by the work of hundreds of scientists, bringing for the first time in millions of years a clear view of these creatures lost in deep time. Here are the real colors of these 5 extinct animals. Meet Sinosauropteryx, the first feathered dinosaur found in China in 1996. Contrary to what people have come to expect from a dinosaur, it wasn't giant, far from it. Its body was very light and agile, just under a meter long. This compsognathid theropod lived at the beginning of the Cretaceous period, 125 million years ago. Like many Chinese dinosaurs, it is one of the most beautifully preserved animals ever found in the history of paleontology, and as a result, it is one of the most beautiful fossils in the world. Not only is it possible to see its preserved plumage with the naked eye, but part of its original color pattern is evident right away. Looking at the fossils of this animal, we notice a layer of hair-like structures called protofeathers. They are, in fact, structurally more like fur than bird feathers. The tail, covered in protofeathers, alternates between lighter and darker regions. In life, Sinosauropteryx's true colors were dazzling. He was red on his back, with a white belly, a ringed tail with red and white stripes, and a black mask around his eyes, something that might superficially resemble a lemur or a raccoon. The color is not merely aesthetic. In nature, it performs a number of functions and sends many messages. Colors can indicate age, sex, camouflage an animal, or make it stand out, either to warn of danger or to attract partners. From sex to protection to communication, the colors of animals are not random. Therefore, by knowing their colors, you can infer many things about their way of life. An animal that camouflages itself is usually prey, and the type of camouflage tells us about the environment it inhabited. For example, open or closed areas. Understanding that there were color differences between males and females can help us look at the reproductive behavior and intelligence of animals. But how was it possible to decipher the colors of Sinosauropteryx? The key to understanding lies in something that even you have: melanosomes. This is the name we give to the cells that house melanin, the protein that gives color to our skin and hair. Melanin is a chemical compound that is extremely resistant to pressure, radiation, and heat, which is why it is used by our body as a protection against the sun's rays. Lighter skin with less melanin is more sensitive to the sun and burns easily. Melanin is so resistant that sometimes it even fossilizes. In 2010, Michael Benton and his team published research at the University of Bristol, convincingly arguing that they had found fossilized melanosomes in Sinosauropteryx. They used present-day birds to infer the colors that Sinosauropteryx's melanosomes would produce. This is because there are some variants of the pigment melanin and different shapes of melanosomes. By combining the analysis of their shapes, distribution, and density, it is possible to get a good idea of the original color of a fossilized structure. If the preservation is generous, of course. After all, this is an important but microscopic detail. According to Benton, one form of melanin called eumelanin gives all the black, brown, and gray colors, while another, pheomelanin, gives the red tones. That's all mammals have, while birds have two other pigments in their feathers: porphyrins that give purple and greenish colors, and carotenoids that go from red to pink. In 2010, it was shown that Sinosauropteryx had melanosomes of the shape that houses the red pigment, phaeomelanosomes. Other pigment capsules suggests that the hairs on the belly and tail rings were white, and a single black detail adorned the animal's face. This was probably one of the most exciting and fascinating scientific discoveries in history. Sinosauropteryx should be as famous as T-Rex for being the first dinosaur to have its true colors reconstructed by paleontologists. Try to imagine this animal alive today, interacting with our world. What a sight it would be. Perhaps we would be more shocking to it than it is to us. Our second animal is also from the Cretaceous period of China and is one of the best known dinosaurs in the fossil record. Psittacosaurus means parrot lizard in reference to its beak, which is very similar to that of the Psittacidae. It is a basal ceratopsian, which means that it was very similar to the ancestor of Triceratops, which lived tens of millions of years later. But unlike its giant descendants, it mostly walked on its hind legs, making it a biped. This Labrador-sized animal may have been one of the most successful dinosaurs of all time, given its abundance in the fossil record and breadth of geographical distribution. It was a generalist herbivore that swallowed small stones to help digest highly fibrous material. It is believed that Psittacosaurus was very intelligent, as it engaged in complex social behavior. Evidence of this is a fossil found during a volcanic eruption that reveals an adolescent female and dozens of young Psittacosaurus, who met a similar end to the inhabitants of Pompeii. As this female had not yet reached reproductive age, she could not be the mother, making this the first known fossil of a nanny. The genus Psittacosaurus is home to 18 different species, represented by hundreds of fossils and some complete skeletons, so it's very likely that there was some variation in color and pattern between the many species. One of these fossils reveals much more than the skeleton. This is the kind of fossil that has the potential to permanently transform our view of an animal, bringing us closer to what it really looked like alive. Psittacosaurus was named in 1923 by Henry Osborn, the same man who named Tyrannosaurus rex. But it was in 2002 that the most complete fossil was found, the Seckenberg Psittacosaurus, published by Gerald Mayer. It reveals that Psittacosaurus had a beige-brown color on its back, punctuated with black spots, with a lighter belly and stiff protofeathers like the spines of a porcupine on its tail. This was incredible, because it demonstrated the presence of protofeathers in a dinosaur very evolutionarily distant from birds, suggesting that this may have been an ancestral feature of all dinosaurs, with some groups retaining or losing it over time. What's more, it was possible to observe the anatomy of a dinosaur cloaca perfectly for the first time. Cloacas are shared orifices for all purposes of excretion and reproduction, and this information gives us more details about the reproductive biology of these animals. The two horns that protrude from the face are most likely selected sexually, for aesthetics or to be used in territorial or pair-bonding disputes between males. The Psittacosaurus pattern made it very efficient at camouflaging itself in the diffuse light of a forested environment. The difference between the darker colors on the back and lighter ones in the belly is a very common camouflage strategy called countershading. We can see it in many of today's animals, from fish to gazelles, because the concept is very simple and very effective. As the light comes from above, it tends to make the upper part of the animal lighter, forming a dark shadow in the belly. When animals have a dark back and a lighter belly, this helps to reduce the visual effect of the animal's shadow, making it less three-dimensional and more difficult to spot from a distance. When the shading has a smoother transition, such as Psittacosaurus, this may indicate that the camouflage works better in dense environments with softer light. Well-defined patterns such as those of Sinosauropteryx are evidence of functional camouflage in open environments, where shadows are more direct. Our understanding of the living appearance of Psittacosaurus has reached an absurd level that many imagine it to be impossible, which makes us wonder, what other details are we neglecting? Our third animal is the Microraptor. Like the previous two, it is from the Cretaceous period of China, being 130 million years old. This is a very well-known dinosaur, with many fossils discovered, some of which even preserve evidence of its last meals, including small fish and lizards. It's the size of a pigeon, and if a Microraptor landed in front of you, you'd be forgiven for mistaking it for a crow. But this crow gets weirder and weirder the more you look at it. Microraptor didn't have a beak like modern birds, even though it had lived alongside beaked birds. It had little needle-like teeth that allowed it to prey on small animals such as amphibians, insects, small mammals, and lizards. Microraptor's wings had 3 sharp claws, just like its other pair of wings. His feet had the curved claw characteristic of Dromaeosauraptors, but were also covered in feathers in a similar way to wings. This means that Microraptor had 4 functional wings, unlike any bird alive today. It also means that standing up, he looked like he was wearing cowboy pants. It also retained a long tail, a trait that was more dinosaurian than avian, but at the end of this tail, a rounded feather structure and 2 long feathers stood out. Microraptors probably didn't fly like today's birds, which use their huge sternum bones to support the powerful pectoral muscles that allow them to fly. Despite having a larger sternum than fully terrestrial dromaeosaurs, it is no match for birds that actually fly. The Microraptor had to use its sharp claws on its hands to climb trees and then glide down to a lower point. The rear wings could serve as a kind of stabilizer, allowing it to be extremely precise and agile in the air. This makes it more of a climbing, jumping, and gliding animal than a flying one. It was very efficient at what it did, as it was a very common species in the forests of the time. But it wasn't at the top of the food chain, and it was most likely prey for larger animals. Avoiding the ground was a very smart move for the Microraptor. In 2012, an article published in Science studied one of the most complete Microraptor fossils to determine 2 things: the organization of the feathers on the body and their colors, and it was very successful. In this study, it was revealed that it had 2 pairs of wings, not just one, and that the tip of its tail was most likely used as a sexual display. These 2 long feathers are common in today's birds, even if Microraptor is not their ancestor. The colors, revealed by the shape, density, distribution, and structure of melanosomes, resembled the feathers of a peacock or crow, with an iridescent effect in a black pattern distributed throughout the body. This means that the Microraptor was black, but in the sunlight, its feathers reflected a bluish glow that changed according to the point of view. A truly stunning animal. We might be led to think that Microraptor was an ancestor of birds, but he wasn't. In fact, it is descended from totally terrestrial raptor dromaeosaurs that also coexisted with the first basal birds. Microraptor lived 30 to 40 million years after the common ancestor between dromaeosaurs and birds, and it may even have preyed on birds smaller than itself. At that time, birds were just another type of dinosaur. But the group that we call true birds, the neorniths, didn't exist yet. There were basal birds and many dinosaurs similar to basal birds, including Microraptors. This means that the Microraptor lineage never evolved into a fully flying animal, and that it developed its ability to glide in a totally convergent way, evolutionarily independent of birds. This could explain why he has 4 wings and the birds have 2, because it was simply another experiment with flight. But it wasn't the strangest by far, because another lineage of dinosaurs like Iki developed wings like bats with long fingers and membranes, making it one of the weirdest dinosaurs known. The 4th animal on our list is considered to be the best preserved giant dinosaur ever found, Borealopelta, which means Northern Shield. It was found by a team of miners in Alberta, Canada in 2011, but they had no idea what it was. It wasn't possible to see the animal because it was trapped in a huge rounded rock called a concretion. Concretions are formed when the chemicals expelled by the decomposition of an animal change the crystalline structure of the rock around the organic mass, forming an iron-rich and very resistant rock, siderite. The miners, together with the Royal Tyrrell Museum, took 14 days to remove the rock from around the concretion, cover it with a protective material and try to get it out of the ground. When the concretion was being carefully lifted, it broke into several pieces. They didn't even know what they had just discovered, but the pieces were taken to the museum anyway. Mark Mitchell, the museum's preparator, dedicated 6 years of his life to separating Borealopelta from the rock, cleaning the fossil thoroughly. His dedication was rewarded when he was honored with the animal's scientific name, Borealopelta markmitchellii. What was revealed was more than fascinating. It was unique, a giant dinosaur mummy which looked disturbingly alive, a new species of nodosaur which lived in Canada 120 million years ago, also in the Cretaceous period. Nodosaurs are closely related to ankylosaurs, but instead of having a giant club at the end of their tails, they sported huge pointed spines, which would have made them formidable opponents. Alive, it was 5 meters long and could weigh up to 1,300 kilograms. Curiously, it was found preserved upside down in a marine sediment. At this point in the Cretaceous, North America was crossed by an ocean that divided it in half. Borealopelta was found more than 200 kilometers from the beach, which gives us a good idea of how it may have fossilized. Borealopelta died while still on land. Its carcass must have been carried by a torrent in the middle of a storm to the ocean. There, decomposition releases gases that inflate the body and make it float, something that is very common today. As the animal's back was very heavy, it floated on its back until it eventually released the accumulated gases. As soon as it stopped floating, it sank into the marine sediment, landing in a stagnant oxygen-poor mud that preserved it for 120 million years. The tail and paws were not preserved, but everything else was. This animal was almost completely covered in osteoderms, plates embedded in its skin, which made it a living tank. In addition to the bone of the spines, the layer of keratin that covered it is preserved, giving us a good idea of its true size when living. Like many of today's animal horns, Borealopelta had a bony center for the spines and a layer of keratin, like a fingernail, on top, which made it much larger than the bone alone might suggest. In addition, many sections of skin have been preserved, showing that it had polygonal scales covering its entire body. An analysis of the skin's organic compounds revealed traces of benzotiazole, a clear indicator of the presence of pheomelanin, the pigment that gives reddish colors. It was possible to see that the largest thorn was very pigmented, with the possibility of even being phosphorescent at the tips. Some of the Borealopelta's intestinal contents were also recovered, revealing that it fed mainly on creeping ferns, with an intriguing piece of charcoal having been swallowed, a sign that its last meal may have been in a place recently hit by a fire. The little bit of skin on the underside of the animal that was preserved was lighter, indicating that it was counter-shaded, just like Sinosauropteryx and Psittacosaurus. This is interesting because large animals of our time have uniform colors, since they can do without camouflage due to their size. The fact that Borealopelta camouflaged itself is an indicator that it could even be potential prey for super predators like Acrocanthosaurus. All this would make living Borealopelta an unforgettable sight, and perhaps an unforgettable sound, since a recent study has identified the fossilized larynx of an ankylosaur, the Psittacosaurus. This larynx seems to have abilities similar to or equal to the vocalization complexity of birds such as parrots. So, as strange as it may seem, there is a chance that Borealopelta could speak, imitating our sounds if it lived today. Our fifth and final animal today is the only one that isn't a dinosaur, but a pterosaur, Tupandactylus, which means Tupã's finger. This is because, unlike birds, pterosaurs flew using a long membrane that extended from the legs to an extremely elongated fourth finger, which formed the wing. These animals on land were quadrupeds, as fossilized footprints show. This Brazilian pterosaur, discovered in 1997 in Crato in the Araripe Basin, dates back to the Cretaceous period and lived 112 million years ago. Pterosaurs and dinosaurs are sister groups that shared their last common ancestor in the Triassic around 250 million years ago. Together, they formed the group Avemetatarsalia. Dinosaurs and pterosaurs coexisted throughout the Mesozoic, becoming extinct along with the non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Tupandactylus imperator was a huge animal with a wingspan of around 4 meters and was an efficient fisher. Its body, like that of probably all pterosaurs, was covered in pycnofibers, small hair-like keratinous filaments. It is uncertain whether the pycnofibers of pterosaurs and protofeathers of dinosaurs are the same thing, inherited from an avimetatarsal ancestor, which would push the origin of the structure that resulted in the feathers to the beginning of the Triassic or even the end of the Permian. But it is very possible that this is a convergent characteristic, very similar but developed independently by 2 or more groups. If this is true, something like hair has appeared at least 3 times in the evolution of tetrapods. Given the incredible state of preservation of Tupandactylus, it was possible to identify small, very short, brown pycnofibers covering the animal's body almost like velvet. They extended across the face and stopped at a keratinous bead that stands out, but surprisingly, they even covered crest. This crest is the animal's most striking and absurd feature. It is made of 2 L-shaped bony projections that support taut keratinous skin. This would make the skull surprisingly light for its size. The living function of these crests is a huge debate, as it seems difficult to prove that they had any aerodynamic function. But the colors of this animal can help reveal the reason for its crest. In 2019, a paper by Pinheiro's team carried out a chemical analysis of the crest of Tupandactylus and revealed eumelanosomes and pheomelanosomes, indicating that the crest had a black and red spotted pattern, while a study published by Kerry Woodruff of the University of Toronto in 2020 found traits that led us to believe that the crest could also be photoluminescent. Photoluminescence is a phenomenon when an animal glows reflecting UV light, which exists in many animals, including fish, reptiles, and birds. Humans need special instruments to visualize these structures, but most animals do not. Light is an electromagnetic wave, and its spectrum is very broad. What we call visible light is only a small portion of the existing frequencies of this wave. Many animals see beyond this into the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums. For animals with this kind of vision, Tupandactylus would have been an extremely eye-catching light show. This leads us to believe that perhaps this crest had a reproductive function, attracting the attention of potential females, an instrument of sexual display. As we can see, the colors of Tupandactylus have given us important insights into its vision, behavior, intelligence, and the function of its crest, and is just one of the first of many animals that we'll soon have a much clearer understanding of. If Tupandactylus could return to the lands where it lived 112 million years later, it would certainly be noticed and would give anyone in its presence an unforgettable memory.
Aqui em cima.
Over the last 10 years of research, we've realized that the colors of dinosaurs and pterosaurs were much more vibrant than we could have ever imagined. We will never find all the fossils. We only have the chance to access the few that are closer to the surface, being destroyed by erosion each and every day. Many of these creatures and stories will never have a name and will remain forgotten by time forever. But other beings have been resurrected by our imagination. Think about it. We are the first generation of living beings to see something so close to a Psittacosaurus in over 100 million years. It is not alive in the flesh, but it was not much different from this representation. So, feel privileged. This video was based on 2 books by Michael Benton, Dinosaurs, New Visions of a Lost World, and The Dinosaurs Rediscovered, both incredible works for anyone interested in paleontology. We are an independent Brazilian studio with a passion for paleontology and art, and we are very grateful to bring our projects to an international audience. Don't forget to subscribe and comment on what you'd like to see in the future. As always, thank you very much for watching to the end, take care, and all the best.